Hello, in this video we're going to continue to build on our game, and what we want to do is, if we want to do anything interesting with this, we need to actually include some unique information about each instance that we create. And to do that, we want to write a couple constructors. Now, I want to add one more field to my class, and what that is, the design specification is going to be both wizards and barbarians have a string field that stores the name of their character. Because we all know when we play these games, it starts up and it says, what would you like your character's name to be? And then you type it in. Now, because this field would be common to both wizards and barbarian, meaning that they both need to get it, I have an option. I could put a string name inside the wizard and put a string name inside the barbarian, but I want to put that in the most general class, so that's going to be up here in the player class. So I'm going to say private string name. And right now it's going to be no name. So what I want to do now is I want to create a constructor, and I'll work in the wizard class that takes 4 pieces of information. Remember, the wizard, what we can tell here, has, it looks like they only have 2 fields, but they actually have 4. They have, from the wizard class, mana and circle, but they also inherit from the player class, HP and name. So we're going to write a constructor here, public wizard, and I'm going to take an int m, int h to represent HP, a string c for circle, and a string n for name. So here's my new constructor, and so what I can do is let's construct a wizard, and we get an error now because as soon as I write a single constructor, the default one disappears, so this is not valid anymore. So let's pass it some information. So we're going to construct a wizard, and they're going to have 100 mana, 100 HP. They're going to belong to a circle called, I don't know, Rift Mages, and his name is going to be Luke, whatever. So what's going to happen now is when I construct this wizard, it's going to invoke this constructor. It's going to pass mana, HP, circle, and name. And now we could assign the appropriate fields the right value. So mana equals M, HP equals H, circle equals C, name equals N. And you say, okay, I'm done. But notice I get 2 errors here. Well, 3 because I spelled circle wrong. What those 2 errors are is that the field HP and the field name are inherited from the player class. And because we've encapsulated them, something you should always do, we can't access them in this constructor. So we need to somehow get into the player class in order to set those fields. Now let's pause for a second and talk about something you could do here which we won't do. And the reason why we won't do this is because the AP exam, which any student in my class that's watching this is preparing to write, does not include the protected modifier. One design option here is to make this protected. So far all we've looked at is private and public, but protected is another type of modifier. And what protected does is protected allows this field to be visible within player in any subsequent subclass. So that means because HP is defined in the player class and wizard is a subclass of player, we can then access that field directly. So though this is a valid approach and would work here, we're actually not going to do this. And the reason that we're not going to do this is because the AP exam does not cover the protected modifier. So we're going to keep this private. So one way to address this is to simply do this, is to make an accessor method, or sorry, a modifier. So we're going to make a public void set HP int H, HP equals H, public void set name int N, name equals N, And now what we can do here, sorry, this is not int n, pardon me, this is string n. Now what we can do here is we can come back to our wizard class, and I could do this dot set name, this dot set HP, h, and that works. Sorry, this dot set name, n. Because what we're doing is we're accessing these publicly accessible mutator methods and passing the appropriate information into the player class, at which point we then have access to these fields. Now, though this works perfectly fine, this is not ideal. In an ideal situation, what we want to do is we want to invoke the player constructor, but we're going to use a player constructor that actually takes the appropriate parameters. So we're going to actually remove this, and we're going to try and access the constructor in the player class. And the question that might come up, well, how do I do that? We know that if we want to access a method in a superclass, we go super.the-method. But how? Well, let's start by coming into this player class, and let's make a constructor that we might want to use. So we might want to use a constructor that looks like this. Public player, I'm going to pass it an int h, which represents the HP, and a string n, which represents the name, and I'm going to say HP equals h, and name equals n. And we'll notice right away, if I save all this, I'm going to get an error in Wizard and Barbarian. So let's say, okay, well, oh, wait a second, there's an error here. What's the error here? And this is an important understanding about the theory of constructors and hierarchies. You must always construct an object from general to specific. So the way Java works is that we can't construct the wizard class, or the wizard object, pardon me, until we've constructed the player object. We can't construct the player object until we've constructed the class object part of it. So it needs to filter its way up and then come back down. We construct it from the general to specific. So the constructor for player is actually being invoked here. We just don't see it. And in fact, what's there is this line right here. What super is a call to the superclass's constructor. By default, Java assumes we will use a constructor with no parameters. So that's what this is right here. When you see super bracket bracket is saying call the constructor in the player class that has no parameters. And that's where our error is coming from. Because right now, the minute I wrote this constructor, that default constructor is gone. Therefore, this is a problem. That super is there by default, so even if I delete it, it's still there. So what I need to do is I need to invoke that specific constructor, and I do that by saying super, and then I pass up the specific parameters I want. So I'm going to pass up h, and I'm going to pass up n. And so now what happens is when I try and construct this wizard object right here, I'm going to invoke the constructor in the wizard class. I'm going to pass it these arguments. So we're going to come into here, save all. We're going to come into here, and the first thing that happens is I invoke the super constructor in the class above. So I need to invoke the player constructor. So I come into the player constructor here, and I've passed it the h to represent the hit points and n to represent the name. And again, we don't see this here, and we don't have to write this, but what's there is this. This line invokes the constructor for object. Very important to understand. We always construct objects from most generic to most specific. And so now, if I save this, this constructor for the wizard class works. Let's do the same thing for the barbarian class. So I can come into the barbarian class, and again, public, barbarian. Remember, constructors actually do have a return type, and that is the type of the class that they're constructing. So we don't write the return type here because it just has to be a reference to that object. int p because it's power now, int h for hit points, string c for clan, and string n for name. And I'm going to intentionally make an error here. I want you to see if you can catch it. So we're going to say power equals p, clan equals c, super h comma n. And I get an error. Oh, besides a semicolon here. You see what that error is? The error is that, remember, we must construct the more generic object first. So we cannot put the super call here. The super call has to be the first thing in the constructor. And now, we save all. We have a constructor that is specifically designed to create wizards and barbarians with specific fields. And we'll just 100, 100. What clan? I don't know. M clan and Frank. Save this. Oh, you there. Let's check what our error is. Oh, not barbarians, barbarian, pardon me. So now if I want to see some information about these, I can go system.out.println w1, system.out.println w2, b1, and I should see the wizard object and the barbarian object, but I get this. And in our next video, we're going to tweak our classes a little bit more so that as opposed to getting this, I get some information that is actually useful in developing our game further. If you have any questions, as always, please don't hesitate to post them.